At our first romantic dinner, my husband stood up to answer a phone call. And right at that moment, an elderly woman at the next table, someone who looked strangely familiar, quietly slid a stack of cash toward me. She leaned in and whispered, "Call a cab right now. Sneak out through the bathroom window. Run." I barely escaped with my life. Hello and welcome. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to Clara's Stories. Leave a like and enjoy the story. But before all this madness happened, the evening had felt perfect, almost too perfect, like one of those soft Sunday movie scenes. Emma Hayes, a black woman, sat in the most expensive restaurant in the city, the Grand Oak Room, smiling like happiness was finally sitting beside her. She was 36, and for the first time ever, she felt like she had finally made it in life. Across the table sat her husband, Daniel Mercer. Husband. That word still felt warm and unbelievable. It had only been 2 weeks since their small but sweet courthouse wedding, and she still wasn't used to calling him that. "Emma, why are you smiling like that?" Daniel asked, his eyes glowing under the chandelier. "Did I say something funny?" "No," she said, taking a sip of icy champagne. The bubbles tickled her tongue pleasantly. "I'm just looking at you and realizing how lucky I am." And it was true. After losing both her parents 2 years earlier, Emma had been completely alone. She had her job, her flower shop, the place she loved the most, and her parents' cozy apartment downtown. But the silence at night felt heavy, almost painful. Then Daniel came into her life, tall, charming, 40 years old, with that little sprinkle of gray hair that somehow made him even more attractive. He walked into her shop one day to buy flowers for his mother, and simply stayed in her life. Their romance grew fast but naturally, like it was always supposed to happen. He didn't bring her cliché roses. He brought daisies, her favorite. He listened to everything she said. About her parents, her work, her childhood. He felt safe. Honest. Solid. "I'm the lucky one," Daniel replied, placing his warm hand over hers. "A woman like you is a miracle these days. My mom loves you. She keeps asking when you'll finally move your things into our family fortress." Emma laughed. Their little joke, the future condo they planned to move into together. For now, Daniel still lived with his mother, Margaret Mercer, a very respected woman at City Hall. Emma liked her. Margaret was warm, welcoming, almost motherly. The waiter refilled their glasses. The manager, a man in his 50s, had already come by twice to check on them personally. He spoke only to Daniel, calling him by name, practically bowing over his shoes. It made Emma feel shy, but Daniel acted like it was normal. Like he was used to being treated that way. "I spoke to my mother today," he continued. "She's so happy for us. She said you're the best thing that ever happened to me." Hearing that made Emma's heart swell. She knew he'd had past relationships, but he never talked much about them. And she didn't care. The past was the past. Then his phone vibrated in his pocket. Daniel checked the caller ID and frowned. "Sorry, darling," he said, standing up. "It's business. Very persistent people. I'll be back in 2 minutes. The lobby is quieter. Order dessert. Your favorite, the one with the raspberries." He kissed her forehead and hurried away. Emma watched him walk, confident, elegant. She smiled. Everything felt so right. She glanced around the restaurant. Wealthy people eating quietly, soft music, clinking glasses. At the table next to hers, an elderly woman sat alone, barely sipping her tea. She was staring at Emma. Emma smiled politely. The woman didn't smile back. She looked strangely familiar. And then Emma remembered. Helen Porter, Gerbera Helen, the sweet woman from the flower shop who always bought orange daisies. But tonight, Helen didn't look sweet at all. She looked terrified. The moment Emma recognized her, Helen leaned forward as if she'd been waiting for that exact second. She looked toward the lobby where Daniel had gone, then quickly pushed herself up from the table and walked shakily toward Emma. She bent close, smelling faintly of valerian root and fear. "Sweetheart, listen carefully," she whispered. Her voice trembled. Her face was pale. Her eyes were filled with raw terror. She reached into her old bag, pulled out a thick bundle of cash wrapped with a rubber band, and pressed it hard into Emma's palm. "He's a monster," Helen gasped. My daughter married him. She's dead. Do you understand? Gone. Vanished. Take this money. Call a cab. Run through the bathroom window. Run. Emma froze. She stared at the cash in her hand, confused and shocked. What daughter? What monster? Was this woman mixing her up with someone else? I think you have the wrong person, Emma whispered. No, Helen said, tears filling her eyes. I'm not mistaken. Run. And with that, she turned and hurried away. Emma sat there, stunned. Was this some twisted joke? The money was real, and the fear in Helen's eyes, painfully real. She looked at the entrance, and her heart stopped. Two large bald men in rough leather jackets walked in. They didn't belong in a fancy restaurant. They scanned the room slowly, like predators. And then their eyes landed on her. They stared. At her. Only her. Instinct kicked in. Emma grabbed her purse, shoved the money inside, and sprinted toward the restrooms. She didn't care who stared. She didn't care about the chair she knocked over. She only cared about staying alive. She ran into the ladies' room, locked the door, and leaned against it, shaking. What was happening? What was this nightmare? She pulled out her phone, her hands trembling so badly she dropped it twice, and opened the taxi app. She chose the flower shop as the destination. Her safe place. The window was too small, too high, and covered with thick metal bars. A notification popped up. White Ford Focus, arriving in 3 minutes. She had to use the main entrance. She took a deep breath, turned toward the door, and froze. Someone was standing there. The restaurant manager, Victor Mercer. But he wasn't smiling anymore. His eyes were cold, angry, disgusted. Excuse me. I need to go, Emma said, trying to squeeze past him. You'll need to wait, he replied calmly, blocking her path. Then she heard Daniel's voice behind him. It's all right, Mr. Mercer. My wife is just tired. I'll handle her. The manager stepped back, closed the door. And Emma heard the chilling sound of a key turning in the lock. She was locked in. Trapped. Emma opened the door. Daniel called softly. Don't scare me like this. She has migraines, he said to the manager. She gets like this sometimes. Lies. Smooth, easy lies. Her whole body went cold. She didn't know this man at all. She scanned the room desperately, tiles, mirror, sink, and then she saw it. A fire alarm. Behind glass. She hesitated for 1 second. Then grabbed her heavy purse and smashed the glass. Cracks. Another hit. Another. Finally shatter. She slammed the red button. The siren exploded. Loud, chaotic, beautiful. Outside shouting. Running. Panic. Smoke drifted through the vents. Real smoke. Something must have caught fire in the kitchen. People panicked. The lock clicked open. The manager burst in angrily. Emma shoved him aside and ran. Ran with everything she had. The dining room was chaos. People running, screaming, knocking things over. Smoke floated in the air like a warning. She saw Daniel. He saw her. Their eyes met. His were full of cold rage. She disappeared into the crowd before he could reach her. She pushed through the doors, down the steps, gasping for air. The fire truck sirens grew louder. She ran and didn't look back. Not once. She ran 1 block, turned a corner, collapsed against a wall trying to breathe. Her phone vibrated. The taxi was waiting. She spotted the white Ford Focus and rushed inside. You okay, miss? The driver asked. I'm fine, she gasped. Please go. Fast. She gave the address of the flower shop. The only place she felt safe. She stared out the window the whole ride. The city lights blurring through her tears. Helen's words kept echoing in her head. She's not alive anymore. When they arrived, Emma paid the driver generously, unlocked her shop, and slipped inside. She locked every bolt, turned on a small light, and finally broke down. She hugged herself, shaking uncontrollably. What now? The police? Would they even believe her? She only had Helen's cash. Her bank, her real savings, was all online. She grabbed her laptop and tried to transfer her money to another card. She entered the details. Waited. A red message popped up. Transaction denied. Your accounts are temporarily frozen. due to a report of suspicious activity filed by your lawful husband, Daniel Mercer. Her stomach dropped. Her life, her money, everything was now locked by him. She tried again. Same red message. Same nightmare. Transaction denied. Those 2 words hit her like ice water. The cold she had only felt on her skin before now shot straight inside her, freezing her from the inside out. She wasn't shaking anymore. She was just numb. The flower shop didn't feel safe anymore. He knew this place. He knew this was where she would run. It was the second place after home where she always felt protected. So of course he would come here. Or he'd send those so-called cousins. She had to leave. Now. But where could she go? Only one address came to her mind. The one place he couldn't just take away. Her apartment. Her parents' place. Her real fortress. He could freeze her money, but he couldn't steal the walls she grew up in. She shut down the laptop, slipped it into her bag along with Helen's wad of cash, put on her coat, and slipped out to the street, locking the shop door carefully twice like she always did. The night city was cold and almost empty. She called another cab, trying not to look over her shoulder, jumping at every passing car. As the cab drove through the familiar streets, the last few weeks replayed in her mind like a cruel movie. Here, Daniel helping her put up wallpaper in the hallway. There. They were laughing together, choosing a new couch. Just last Sunday, he brought her coffee in bed. All those moments that had felt so warm and real were now poisoned. Every gesture, every word, every smile. None of it was random. It had all been part of a plan leading to this exact night. The cab turned onto her street. The old 5-story building, the big maple tree spreading its branches by the entrance. Everything looked so familiar, so painfully normal. She paid quickly and jumped out before the driver could even wish her goodnight. Her heart was beating hard, but it wasn't just panic anymore. There was also hope. Soon she would be inside her apartment, lock all the deadbolts, and finally be safe. Tomorrow morning, she would figure something out. She ran up the stairs to the 3rd floor. There it was. The brown fake leather door with the number 27. Her door. She dug through her bag, found her keys, but her fingers weren't obeying her. The key ring fell to the floor with a loud metallic clatter that echoed around the quiet stairwell. She snatched it up, picked out the right key, and pushed it into the lock. It didn't go in. She pulled it out, flipped it, tried again. Same thing. The key slid in just a little and hit something hard, like something was stuffed inside the lock. She tried the second lock below. Same thing. No. This couldn't be happening. She tried both locks again and again, pressing harder each time, but it was useless. A wild thought flashed through her mind. Did someone jam matches into the locks? But why? The panic she just managed to push down came rushing back even stronger. She started knocking. First softly, then louder. Open up. Please open up. This is the police. What's going on? Silence. She listened. Nothing. Not a single sound from inside. Then she began pounding on the door with her fists and her feet. Open up. This is my apartment. I live here. Her scream was full of pure desperation. Just then a lock clicked on the opposite side of the landing. A door opened a crack. Marilyn Foster, her neighbor since childhood, peeked out. Emma? Is that you? What's going on? Honey, why are you shouting? Marilyn, I can't get into my home, Emma gasped, turning to her. The locks, they won't open. And at that exact moment, her own door slowly opened. But it wasn't Daniel. It wasn't a police officer. It was a complete stranger. A woman in her 50s in a faded bathrobe and worn-out slippers stood there. Her hair was lazily thrown into a messy bun, and her face showed nothing but irritation. Behind her, the smell of fried potatoes drifted out. What do you want? She asked roughly, looking Emma up and down. Why are you making such a big scene? Do you know what time it is? Emma froze. She could only stare at this strange woman standing in the doorway of her apartment, her home. No words came out. The air felt sucked out of her chest. I live here, Emma finally whispered. What? The woman let out a short laugh. I rent this place. And who are you supposed to be? I've never seen you in my life. By now, Other doors in the building were opening. Old Mr. Arthur from the 5th floor peeked out. A young couple from the 4th came to their doorway. Everyone watched with the eager curiosity of people seeing drama right outside their door. Then there were footsteps and voices from the stairwell below. Emma turned. 2 people were coming upstairs. Daniel and his mother, Margaret Mercer. Daniel looked worried and upset. Margaret looked like she always did, calm, classy, in complete control. Her face carried a kind of gentle, sorrowful concern, like a mother dealing with a difficult situation. "Please excuse the noise," Daniel said to all the neighbors at once. His voice was calm, steady, convincing. "Emma is a bit overwhelmed. Overworked. She's had a nervous breakdown. We were just coming to pick her up and take her home." Margaret walked up to Emma and gently took her by the arm. Her fingers were ice cold. "My dear Emma, come now," she said softly. "There's no need for a scene. Come with us. You need to rest. Everything will be fine. We're only trying to help you." The neighbors, who had been confused a moment ago, now started exchanging knowing looks. Of course. Margaret Mercer, a respected woman. Deputy chair of the Metropolitan Housing Authority. A big name in the city. Someone like her wouldn't lie, right? And Emma. Well, yes, she had seemed a bit on edge lately. Maybe she really was having some kind of breakdown. The way they looked at Emma changed. There was pity in their eyes now. And suspicion. "This is my apartment," Emma screamed, yanking her arm away. "My parents' apartment. What is this woman doing here?" "Emma, dear, you must be confused about something," Marilyn said gently but firmly, stepping fully out of her doorway. "You told me yourself you were having problems, debts. It's embarrassing, I understand, but accusing such a respected woman as Mrs. Mercer? She's only trying to help you." Daniel sighed sadly, like this hurt him deeply. "Marilyn, you're right," he said. "Emma had some financial difficulties. To stop creditors from seizing her apartment, we temporarily transferred the rights to my mother, just as a technical move, to protect her property. And while we sort things out, my mother officially rented the apartment to this lady, so the place wouldn't stay empty. Everything is completely legal." The woman in the bathrobe jumped in immediately. Yes, I rent from Mrs. Mercer," she said quickly. "I have a contract. All official." The lie was so bold, so outrageous, that for a second Emma was simply stunned. "What creditors? What debts? You're all lying," she screamed, her voice breaking. "I never transferred anything. I never signed anything." Daniel looked at her with deep, sad eyes. Then he turned to his mother. "Mom, I didn't want to do this in front of everyone," he said softly, "but I guess I have no choice." He opened the expensive leather briefcase he was holding and pulled out a neat folder. From it, he took out a stack of papers, an official contract, several pages stapled together. "Here," he said, holding it so everyone could see. "The notarized sales contract." He walked up to Emma and unfolded the last page right in front of her face. "Look, Emma, you just forgot." She lowered her eyes and saw it. At the bottom of the page, under all the official text, was her own signature. Clear, smooth, completely familiar. Hayes Emma. At that moment, a memory hit her like lightning. 2 nights ago, they'd been sitting on the couch watching a movie. He'd come over with a small stack of papers. "Sweetheart, this is for utilities, registration, some formalities after the wedding. I need your signature in a few places so I can take care of the offices myself and not bother you." She'd been happy. She'd trusted him. Without really looking, she had signed wherever he pointed. Her signature wasn't forged. She herself had signed her own sentence. She had given him her home with her own hand. The paper was inches from her face. Emma stared at her signature, at those familiar letters, and everything around her disappeared. The sounds of the stairwell faded. The whispers of the neighbors, Margaret's calm voice, the disapproving sniff of the woman in the bathrobe. All of it turned into vague, distant noise, like the ocean in a seashell. She saw only her name, the signature that had wiped out her whole life. She had given them her home herself. Smiling. Trusting. "See, darling." Daniel's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. "You just forgot. Too much stress. It's okay. Come with us, have some tea, get some rest. Everything will be fine. Margaret took hold of her arm again. This time her grip wasn't soft. It was hard. Like a handcuff. Like a jailer. Come, Emma. Don't be stubborn, she said. And suddenly the numbness shattered. It was replaced by pure animal fear. Going with them. Into their house. After everything that had just happened. Helen's words from the restaurant echoed in her head like a scream. My daughter married him. She's not alive anymore. If she went with them now, she wouldn't be alive either. Emma yanked her arm away with all her strength, tearing herself from Margaret's iron grip. Don't touch me, she shouted, backing toward the railing. Her movement was so sudden that both Daniel and Margaret froze for a second in surprise. That 1 second was all she needed. She spun around and bolted down the stairs, barely touching the steps, grabbing the cold handrail, jumping 2 steps at a time. Emma, stop. Daniel shouted after her. The fake concern in his voice was gone. Now it was just a sharp, nasty command. I said stop. She didn't stop. She ran past her floor. Past the second. Past the first. She heard them starting down after her, their footsteps pounding above. The heavy front door slammed shut in front of her. She pushed it with all her weight, stumbled outside, and burst into the damp night. She ran without looking back. She didn't know where. Just away. Away from that yard. Away from those windows that had been her home that same morning. The wind whipped her face. Tears mixed with the light drizzle and blurred her vision. She ran for several blocks until her lungs were on fire. Finally, she ducked into a dark alley between buildings, slid down the cold wall, and broke down sobbing. She had nothing left. No home. No money. No husband. Because now she knew he had never really been a husband at all. She was alone in a huge, cold city, humiliated in front of her neighbors, branded as crazy, homeless. She sat there in that alley for what felt like an hour, shaking from the cold and from misery. Slowly the sobs faded. What remained was a dull, heavy ache inside her chest. She had to do something. She couldn't just stay on the street. She remembered the money in her bag. Helen's money. The only thing she had left. She pulled out her phone. The screen was speckled with rain. Where could she go? A hotel would be too expensive. She had no idea how long she'd have to make this money last. She searched online for a cheap hostel. A few addresses popped up. One of them was not too far away, on the other side of downtown. She called a cab, forcing her voice to sound normal, and stepped back out of the alley into the freezing wind. The hostel was a rundown place with a worn-out sign. Inside, it smelled like damp walls and chlorine. The half-asleep receptionist took her money for one night, didn't ask many questions, and handed her a key to a tiny room with an iron bed and a small nightstand. The window looked out onto a blank back wall of the neighboring building. But Emma didn't care. There were walls here, and a lock on the door. She went inside, locked the door carefully, sat down on the squeaky bed, and pulled out her phone again. She scrolled through her contacts, not knowing who to call. A friend? What would she even say? My husband is a con man who stole my apartment 2 weeks after our wedding? They wouldn't believe her. They'd think she had lost her mind, just like the neighbors. Her boss from work? A strict, proper man. He would never tolerate this kind of scandal around one of his employees. Then her thumb stopped on one name. Hélène Porter. Gerbera Helen. She had saved the number months ago when Helen called the shop to order flowers for a neighbor's birthday. Helen was the only person in the world who knew the truth. The only one who had tried to warn her. Emma pressed the call button. Her heart hammered in her chest. What if she didn't pick up? What if that moment at the restaurant had just been a sudden impulse, and now she didn't want to get involved? After a few long rings, a thin, shaky voice answered. Hello. Helen Porter, Emma whispered, her voice cracking. It's Emma. From the flower shop. There was silence. For a second, Emma thought the call had dropped. Honey, finally, Helen said. The relief in her voice was so strong that tears filled Emma's eyes again. You're alive? Where are you? Are you okay? No, Emma sobbed. I'm not okay at all. She told her everything. Broken sentences between tears. The frozen accounts, the locks, the strange woman in the bathrobe, the sales contract with her own signature. Helen listened quietly, without interrupting. When Emma finished, Helen only said 3 words. But she said them so firmly and confidently that a tiny spark of hope lit up inside Emma. "Give me the address." "I'm coming." 40 minutes later, there was a soft knock at the door of the shabby room. It was Helen. She came in, looked around, then looked at Emma, and without saying anything, she just went over and hugged her. In that slightly awkward motherly hug, there was more real warmth than in all of Daniel's sweet words over the last month. "Come to my place," she said. "You don't belong here." Helen's apartment was small and simple, but very clean and cozy. It smelled like herbs and old books. The walls were covered with pictures, mostly of the same young woman with big, bright eyes and a gentle smile. In one photo she had braids and a bow. In another, she wore a graduation gown. In a third, she was laughing, holding a huge bouquet of orange gerberas. "That's Vera," Helen said quietly when she noticed Emma staring at the pictures. "My daughter." She led Emma into the kitchen, put the kettle on, and took some jam from the cupboard. Emma sat at the table in silence, unable to take her eyes off Vera's portrait hanging right in front of her. "She loved your shop so much," Helen said as she poured tea into 2 cups. "She always said you had the freshest flowers and the best taste, that you weren't just a salesperson, but a real artist. That's why I recognized you right away. Not you me, but I recognized you." Helen sat down opposite her. Her face looked tired and drawn. Heavy shadows lay under her eyes. "What happened to you," she said slowly, "is almost exactly what happened to her. 1 to 1. He appeared just like that, out of nowhere. Charming. Attentive. After 3 months, he proposed. Vera had her own place, a little studio apartment her grandmother left her. A month after the wedding, he convinced her to sign the apartment over to him. He told her it would help them get a bigger mortgage for a family home, that it was just paperwork. She believed him. She loved him." Helen paused and took a sip of tea. Her hands trembled. "And a month later, they supposedly went out on a boat," she continued. "At least, that's what he said. A storm came. The boat flipped. Vera couldn't swim well. He said he tried to save her, but couldn't. They found him on the shore, cold in shock. They found her 2 days later. The police called it an accident." "Oh my God," Emma whispered. It was all she could say. "He played the grieving widower," Helen said bitterly. "Everyone felt sorry for him. The apartment went to him as the only heir. He sold it 3 weeks after the funeral. And I never believed him. Not for a second. I started digging quietly, asking questions, collecting information bit by bit. And I realized my Vera wasn't the first. And she wasn't the last. When I saw him with you in your shop, I knew you were next. I watched you, waited for a chance. And when I saw you in that restaurant tonight, I knew it was my only moment to warn you." Emma sat there in shock. Vera's story was her story. The same pattern. The same script. The only thing missing was the ending, the one with the boat and the accident. "But how?" she whispered. "How do they manage all this? The documents, the notary, it all looks so official. They must have someone backing them. Some powerful people, some patrons." Helen looked at her with a long, heavy stare. "Patrons? That's exactly it," she said. "He's not working alone. He's just the bait." The pretty face. The whole operation is run by his mother, Margaret Mercer. Emma could hardly believe it. "But she's such a respected woman," Emma protested weakly. "She seems so caring." "That's a mask," Helen said sharply. "Do you know what she really does? All her public work is just decoration. Margaret Mercer is the deputy chair of the Metropolitan Housing Authority." Emma froze, clutching her cold cup of tea. Housing Authority. The place where all real estate deals are recorded. Where the archives are kept. Where all the official stamps are made. "She has access to all the databases," Helen said, her voice like a final judgment. "She has all the forms, all the stamps, all the power to make any fake contract look completely legal. She can make it look like your apartment never belonged to you. And nobody will believe you because she is the authority." Helen's words hung in the warm, dim kitchen like thick smoke. Housing Authority, Deputy Chair. Suddenly, all the things that had felt a bit strange now clicked together into one horrible, clear picture. The restaurant manager's submissive attitude. Margaret's calm confidence in front of the neighbors. The neatly prepared, notarized contract pulled out of her briefcase in seconds. None of it was random. It was all part of a chain carefully built in the corridors of power. So this is how it is, Emma whispered into the air. This is the perfect crime. Exactly, Helen nodded, her face even more hollow. She has everything. Power, a spotless reputation, access to documents. She can create any paper, back any lie. And Daniel is her pretty front, her instrument. He finds lonely women with property, wins their trust. After that, it's just routine. Her routine. Emma stood up and started pacing around the kitchen. The helpless despair she'd felt back at the hostel was gone. In its place was a sharp, clear anger. They had betrayed her, used her, thrown her out of her own life like trash, and done it all smiling in front of everyone, while making her look like the problem. We have to go to the police, she said, suddenly stopping. We have to tell them everything. Vera's story, my story. They have to listen to us. They will listen, Helen replied bitterly. They'll write everything down. Then they'll send a request, guess where? To the Metropolitan Housing Authority, to check your documents. And do you know what answer they'll get? They'll get an official letter, with a signature and stamp, saying that citizen Emma Hayes voluntarily, in a clear mind and full understanding, sold her apartment to citizen Margaret Mercer. They'll attach a certified copy of the contract. They'll see us as two women slandering a respected official. At best, they'll wave us away. At worst, they'll start a case against you. Each word from Helen felt like another nail in the coffin of Emma's hope. She was right. Against an official document, their words meant nothing. They were just two women, one broken by grief, one labeled unstable and hysterical. So we need proof, Emma said stubbornly. Real proof. Something they can't ignore. Something that shows this isn't just one case, but a whole system. And where would we get that? Helen sighed. She holds all the documents. All the strings lead back to her. Emma sat back down. She needed to think. Who could help them? Someone close, but outside this nightmare. Only one name came to mind. Valerie Jenkins. Her assistant. Her friend from the flower shop. Val was quiet, a little shy but honest and good. She had known Emma for years. She definitely wouldn't believe some story about a nervous breakdown and creditors. Maybe Val had noticed something. Maybe she had heard something. Daniel had been in the shop many times. He might have said something when Emma wasn't there. Any little detail could be a clue. This was their only chance. I need to meet someone, Emma said firmly. My colleague Val. That's risky, honey, Helen replied, shaking her head. They might already be watching your friends. And the shop. I'll be careful, Emma said. I'll call her from your phone and set the meeting in a quiet place. She's my only hope. She dialed Val's number from Helen's phone. Val picked up almost immediately. Her voice was tense and worried. Emma, thank God. What happened? Your Daniel was here this morning, looking for you. He said you ran away from home. That you weren't well. I've been so worried. Val, I'm okay, Emma said quickly. But I need to talk to you urgently. It's a matter of life and death. Please don't tell anyone. Can you meet me in an hour, in the park behind the market? Yes, of course, Val answered without hesitation. I'll be there. An hour later, wearing Helen's old coat, and with a scarf tied over her head to hide her hair, Emma stepped outside. She decided to walk a slightly longer route and pass by her shop. She just wanted to see it. To at least look at the place that had also been taken from her. As she turned onto the familiar street, she noticed something strange from afar. A small crowd, maybe 10 or 15 people, stood in front of her shop. She saw a car with the logo of a local newspaper on the side. A photographer stood nearby, holding a big camera. Emma's heart squeezed painfully. She moved closer, hiding behind the other people. What she saw next made her feel sick. In the middle of the crowd, under the flash of cameras, stood Margaret Mercer. She wasn't in house clothes now. She was in a strict business suit, hair perfectly styled, every inch the public official. She was giving an interview. A young journalist with a notepad stood beside her, nodding along. Margaret spoke in her usual public voice, the calm, serious tone of someone who cares deeply about the city and its people. That's why working with the citizens is so important, she was saying. She was saying loudly, here at the Housing Authority, we try to stay close to the people and solve their urgent problems. Take this wonderful flower shop, for example. We help small businesses. We support entrepreneurs. Emma listened to this and almost couldn't believe it. Margaret had come to her shop to act like a hero, using Emma's disaster as a backdrop. It was shameless. And right then, Margaret Mercer seemed to feel Emma's eyes on her. She looked up, and her gaze went straight through the crowd and locked on Emma. For a split second her eyes narrowed. Then she suddenly smiled wide, bright, and happy. "Emma, my dear, thank goodness," she shouted across the street. She started walking straight toward her, pushing people aside. Emma froze like a rabbit in front of a snake. It was too late to run. Margaret came right up to her and grabbed both her hands. Her grip was iron again. She turned Emma so she was facing the journalist and the photographer. "Look, here's our runaway. We were so worried," she said, her voice full of fake relief. "Emma, please come home. Stop listening to that poor, grief-stricken old woman who is confused. Daniel has forgiven you for everything. He's not even angry that you took the money. We understand. You're under stress. We will help you." It was a brutal hit. In just a few sentences, in front of witnesses and the press, she turned Emma into a thief who stole from her own husband and a weak, unstable woman led astray by a crazy old lady. The crowd started whispering. The journalist scribbled quickly in his notebook. The photographer kept clicking, capturing the scene. The respectable official and the messy, wild-eyed Emma. At that moment, the shop owner, Thomas Barrett, came out of the flower shop. He saw everything, the reporters, Margaret, Emma, and he heard Margaret's words about stolen money. His face flushed with anger. "Hayes," he roared, marching toward her. "What are you doing here? A scandal in front of my shop, dragging my name into some newspaper story about theft? You're fired. I never want to see you here again. Got it?" He grabbed Emma roughly by the shoulder and shoved her away. Away from the door, away from the cameras. "Get out of here, lady," he shouted at Margaret. "Sort out your family drama somewhere else." Emma staggered from the shove. The humiliation was complete. She had lost everything, her home, her money, her good name, and now her job. She stood in the middle of the street, crushed and disgraced, while people stared at her with a mix of pity and disgust. Someone pushed her from behind, forcing her out of the crowd. "Don't block the way," a man snapped. Just then, as Emma passed by pale, terrified Val standing right by the entrance, Val made a quick, almost invisible move. She slipped something cold and metal into Emma's palm, and closed her fingers around it. "I'm so sorry," Val whispered, so quietly it was barely audible. Her eyes were full of fear. "My cousin works as a cleaner at the Housing Authority. She gave me this just in case. Margaret is super paranoid. She keeps all the real stuff in her office. She has a personal gray ledger there. Please, Emma, don't tell anyone where you got this." Shocked, Emma opened her hand. There was a key. Just a simple metal office door key. The cold metal dug into her skin as she stood in the middle of the sidewalk, and everything around her turned into broken fragments. Her boss's furious face, the camera clicks, the pitying and judging looks of strangers who were already starting to walk away, bored with her pain. Margaret Mercer, once she had done what she came to do, climbed into a waiting black government car like a queen. Emma closed her fist around the key and hid it. Then she turned and walked away. She wasn't running. She didn't even have the strength for that anymore. She just walked fast, almost marching, forcing her legs to move, to get away from that place of total humiliation. In her head she still heard Val's whisper, "Gray ledger. Don't tell anyone." She came back to Helen about an hour later, slipping through courtyards and dark alleys like she was some kind of criminal. When she entered the apartment, she went straight to the kitchen, sat at the table, and opened her hand. The key dropped onto the oilcloth with a dull clink. Helen looked at the key first, then at Emma's dead pale face. "What is that?" she asked. "It's a key," Emma answered in a hoarse voice. "To her office at the housing authority." She told Helen everything that had happened at the shop, about the reporters, the public accusation of theft, being fired, and Val's desperate whisper. Helen picked up the key in her wrinkled hand and weighed it. The usual quiet sadness in her eyes changed into a hard, focused fire. "The gray ledger," she repeated. "If it's real, that's our only chance. Everything will be in there. Names, addresses, dates, proof." "But how do we get in?" Emma asked. "They won't let us inside. And even if they did, what would we do?" "We can't go in during work hours," Helen said firmly. "So we go at night." Emma winced. "Break into the housing authority at night?" "Helen Porter, that's insane. They'll catch us." "And then what?" "And then what?" Helen cut in quietly but sharply. "What else can they take from you? They've already taken your home, your money, your job, your good name. They took my daughter. We have nothing left to lose. This key is our last card. If we don't use it now, tomorrow might be too late. They won't leave you alone after that newspaper show. They'll find you." She was right. After today's performance with the press, they weren't going to stop. They'd corner her, lock her in a mental hospital or arrange another accident. "Fine," Emma said at last, feeling a cold, steady resolve grow inside her. "We go tonight." They spent the rest of the day planning in tense silence. Helen pulled out an old but detailed city map from a cupboard. Together, they studied the area around the housing authority. The building was huge and gray, from the 1950s, taking up a whole block, like a stone fortress. But Val had said her cousin worked there as a cleaner, which meant there had to be a staff entrance, a service door. And cleaning at night meant the building would still be open for workers even after the office staff went home. They waited until 11 p.m. The city became quiet. They put on dark, plain clothes. Emma slipped the key into her pocket. It felt heavy and icy, a constant reminder of how crazy their plan was. They walked through back streets, avoiding bright lights. At night, the housing authority building looked even scarier than in the daytime. A dark block with only a few lit windows high up. They walked around it and finally found what they were looking for. A plain metal door in the inner courtyard. Trash containers stood beside it. They hid in the shadows and watched. Around midnight, two women in work overalls walked to the door. They were smoking and chatting. One of them wedged the door open with a brick so it wouldn't close and then walked away, probably to start cleaning. That was their chance. Emma's heart was beating like crazy. She and Helen exchanged a quick look, then slipped out of the darkness and darted through the half-open metal door. Inside, there was a long, dim corridor that smelled like bleach. From somewhere far off, they could hear the hum of a floor polisher. On tiptoe, they went the other way, heading toward the center of the building. The hallways were empty and echoey. Every step made a sound. They passed door after door with signs: privatization department, legal department, archives. Margaret Mercer's office was on the third floor. The sign on the door read, "Mercer Margaret, Deputy Chair." Emma took out the key. Her hands were shaking so badly that she missed the keyhole the first time. She held her breath and tried again. The key turned with a soft click. They slipped inside and shut the door behind them. The office was spotless. Not just tidy but almost unreal. A huge polished dark wood desk with not a single speck of dust. An expensive leather chair. Perfectly straight stacks of papers. A pencil holder with all the pencils sharpened to a point. No family photos, no personal things, just cold, perfect order. "Search," Helen whispered. They started looking, trying not to make a sound. Emma took the desk. She opened the drawers one by one. Everything was neatly arranged. Official folders, office supplies, a notebook filled with tiny neat handwriting. But nothing that looked like a gray ledger. Helen checked the big bookcase. It was full of law books, collections of regulations, reference manuals. No secret books, no obvious hiding spots. 20 minutes passed. Their hope started to crumble. Had Val been wrong? Or did Margaret keep the ledger somewhere else? Frustrated, Helen walked over to the wall opposite the desk and tapped it lightly with her knuckles. Hollow, she muttered in irritation. Empty. Emma looked up at that wall. It was Margaret's wall of fame, covered with plaques, certificates, and framed photos. In one picture she shook hands with the mayor. In another she spoke at a conference. In another she received an award for excellent service. Then Emma noticed something only a florist with an eye for perfect symmetry would see. One of the frames, the largest photo where Margaret stood next to the county executive, was hanging just a little crooked, just a few millimeters off. In a room this controlled and precise, that made no sense. Wait, Emma said, walking over. Instead of simply straightening the frame, she grabbed it with both hands and pulled gently. She felt it move with a tiny click. It wasn't just a picture. It was a door. Behind it was a small safe built into the wall. Helen gasped. The safe was small with a round combination lock dial. The code, Helen breathed. We'll never guess it. But Emma wasn't looking at the safe. She turned her eyes to the wall beside it. Among the awards hung a heavy framed bronze plaque that read, Metropolitan Housing Authority, founded 1955. Paranoid people, like Val had said, don't use random numbers. They pick something they will never forget. What meant more to Margaret, whose whole life revolved around this place, than its founding year? Emma reached for the dial. Slowly, with shaking fingers, she turned it. 1, 9, 5, 5. Inside the lock, something clicked. Emma grabbed the handle and pulled. The heavy door of the safe opened quietly. Inside, on a single shelf, lay a small, thick gray book with a solid gray cover. Plain and unmarked. Emma took it out with trembling hands and laid it on the desk. She opened it. Her breath caught in her throat. It was more than proof. It was a death sentence. The book was neatly divided into columns. Name, property address, perpetrator, status, notes. In the perpetrator column, the same name was written each time. Mircere J. The first entry, the second, the third. Under the third entry, Emma saw a familiar address, Vera's small studio apartment. In the notes column, it said cold and short. Accident. Property sold. She flipped through quickly. Fourth entry, fifth, sixth, seventh. 8 entries total. 8 apartments. 8 marriages or business deals with Daniel. 8 lives with notes beside them like, vanished without a trace. Overdose. Traffic accident. All of it backed by copies of official documents with housing authority stamps and Margaret's signature. The last entry, number 8, was hers. Hazel. Followed by her parents' apartment address. In the status column it said in neat, even handwriting, in progress. Those 2 words sent an icy wave through Emma. She wasn't a wife. She wasn't even a person to them. She was just an unfinished task on their to-do list. Helen leaned over her shoulder. She saw her daughter's name, the short line about the accident, and a quiet, strangled sound came from her chest. She swayed, and Emma had to hold her upright. Easy, Helen. Easy, Emma whispered, though she herself felt the floor slipping away beneath her feet. We found it. We found what we needed. We have to act fast. Take the book. That's crazy, Helen breathed. They'll notice it's gone right away. We have to copy it. All of it. Every page. My phone, Emma thought. She pulled out her old smartphone. The screen was cracked, the battery almost dead, but the camera still worked. She turned it on and quickly started taking pictures of the ledger page by page. Her hands were shaking so badly some photos came out blurry, and she had to retake them. The quiet click of the shutter sounded incredibly loud in the still office. Helen stood next to her, holding onto her shoulder, staring at the pages where her daughter's fate and 7 other lives were written like accounting entries. Faster, honey. Faster, she whispered. Emma turned a page. Click. Another page. Click. She was halfway through when they both froze. Footsteps in the hallway. Not the slow, dragging steps of a cleaner. These were fast, confident male steps, and they were heading straight for their door. Emma rushed to the desk and grabbed the gray ledger, trying to put it back in the safe, but it was already too late. The key turned in the lock. The door flew open. Daniel stood there, He wasn't in his expensive restaurant suit now, but in a black turtleneck and jeans. Somehow, that made him look even more dangerous, stripped of the nice guy wrapper. His eyes were full of cold rage. He wasn't alone. Behind him, Val stood in the doorway, her face streaked with tears, her lips shaking. "I'm sorry, Emma," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. They found out about my cousin, the cleaner. They threatened my whole family. I didn't want to." Daniel shoved her aside roughly. She fell to her knees in the corridor, still crying. He stepped into the office. His gaze flew around the room. He saw Helen, then Emma, then the open safe and the gray ledger on the desk. All his practiced calm, his charm, his fake warmth disappeared in a heartbeat. There was no loving husband, no kind businessman left. In front of them stood a cornered, furious predator. "You," he hissed, and there was so much hatred in that one word that Emma stepped back without thinking. "You two old fools ruined everything. Everything." He lunged, not at Helen, but straight at Emma. She had the phone. She was the one with the evidence. He wanted to destroy it. He was strong and fast. He grabbed her wrist and twisted it so hard she screamed. The phone flew out of her hand and fell to the floor. With his other hand he grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. "You'll regret the day you were born," he snarled in her face. And then something happened that he didn't expect at all. The quiet, fragile old woman, Helen, who had seemed almost too weak to stand, turned into a storm. There was no fear left in her, only wild, burning mother's rage over her dead daughter. She snatched up the heavy glass water carafe from the table and smashed it down on Daniel's head with all her strength. There was a dull, sickening thud. The glass didn't break, but the blow was brutal. Daniel's eyes widened in shock. His hand loosened in Emma's hair. He staggered and crashed onto the carpet, letting go of her. "Run!" Helen shouted, grabbing Emma's arm. Shaking, Emma bent down, grabbed the phone from the floor, and ran out of the office with Helen. They raced past Val, who stayed on the floor crying, not even lifting her head. "Security!" They heard Daniel rasp behind them. He was already getting up. "Third floor. Stop them!" They ran to the staircase and down, just down. Their footsteps echoed in the building. Above them, more heavy steps thundered as security started the chase. They flew down to the first floor, straight to the main exit. Tall glass doors, always open during the day, but now a heavy chain and a big padlock hung across them. They were trapped. From the stairs behind them, voices shouted, "There they are! Block all exits!" "This way," Helen gasped, yanking Emma's sleeve. She pushed her toward a small, plain door under the stairs with a sign that read, "Utility Closet." The door was unlocked. They rushed inside, squeezing into the narrow room filled with mops and buckets. It smelled like damp rags and cleaning chemicals. "What now?" Emma whispered, trying to catch her breath. Out in the hallway, footsteps were getting closer. Helen looked at her with a long, steady gaze. There was no fear or anger there now, only a cold, firm decision. "Now, honey, you do exactly what I say," she said quietly but firmly. She grabbed Emma by the shoulders. "They're looking for the gray ledger and anyone who's seen it. But the real proof is on your phone. You are the proof." She turned Emma around and shoved her deeper into the closet, then stepped in after her, placing herself between Emma and the door. "I'll hold them off," she said, not looking back. "No," Emma cried. "Helen, don't do this." But Helen pushed her deeper into the closet again as if she didn't hear. "Tomorrow at noon, sharp, there's a forum in the Civic Center auditorium," Helen said quickly. "His mother will get an award there. Go there. Show everyone what's on your phone. I'm buying you time." Before Emma could answer, Helen pulled the closet door shut. There was a scrape and a click as she turned the old lock from the outside. Emma threw herself at the door, pounding with her fists. "Open the door, Helen. Open it." But the only answer was the sound of footsteps and Daniel's furious voice. "She's here. Grab her. Where's the other one?" Emma pressed her eye to the keyhole. She saw two huge security guards run up to Helen. She stood in the middle of the hallway, small and slight, but with her head held high, staring straight at Daniel, who was holding his aching head. "Where is she?" he growled. Helen said nothing. He signaled to the guards. They grabbed her roughly by the arms and dragged her away toward the exit. She didn't fight them. She only turned her head for a second toward the closet, and Emma could have sworn she saw her give the tiniest wink. And then she was gone. And Emma was alone, locked in the dark utility closet, helpless, listening to the footsteps of the only friend she had, and the man who wanted her dead, moving away. Emma spent the whole night on the cold floor of that narrow, dark closet. She didn't cry. She had no tears left. Inside, everything felt burned out and empty, except for one thing, a hard, icy pillar of rage and determination standing in the middle of that emptiness. Again and again she repeated Helen's words in her head. Go there. Show everyone. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was a command. A last wish. Helen had given up her freedom, maybe even her life, to give Emma this chance. Emma had no right to waste it. She held her phone tight against her chest like the most precious thing she owned. Inside that little piece of plastic and glass were the lives and deaths of 8 people. Inside it was her only hope for justice. In the early morning, when the gray sky outside the tiny barred window near the ceiling began to brighten, she heard footsteps again. The early cleaning staff had come in. They talked loudly, pushing their buckets along the floor. Someone tried to open the closet door. Locked again? A woman's voice complained. What is wrong with this? This lock keeps jamming. Forget it. We'll open it later, another voice said. She waited until around 8 o'clock, when the building started filling with employees. First came a low hum of voices, then the sharp tapping of heels in the corridor. She waited another 30 minutes, until the biggest rush of people in the building had died down. Then she made up her mind. She gently knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked harder. Hello? Is anyone there? Please open the door. Footsteps came closer on the other side. She heard someone mutter, and then the scrape of a key turning. The same cleaner from before opened the door. When she saw Emma standing there, hair messy, eyes swollen, she jumped back in shock. Who are you? How did you get in there? Got locked in by accident, Emma said quickly. Before the woman had time to question anything, Emma slipped out into the hallway and walked fast toward the exit. No one stopped her. It was a busy morning in the office, and everyone was focused on their own tasks. She stepped outside. Technically, she was free, but she didn't feel relieved at all. She knew Helen had most likely already been taken to the police, accused of attacking Daniel, maybe even worse. Meanwhile, Margaret Mercer was still untouchable. Today, Margaret would be the star of the show, standing proudly on stage, getting an award as a pillar of the community. That thought gave Emma strength. She only had a few hours. She started running, this time not hiding, not sneaking. She went straight into action. First stop was the nearest coffee shop. She ordered the cheapest coffee on the menu, just so she could sit down near a power outlet and charge her almost dead phone. While the phone was slowly charging, she searched online for information about the forum Helen had mentioned. Helen had been right. Civic Center Auditorium. Start time, 12 p.m. Event. Ceremony for outstanding service to the city. Guest of honor, the mayor. Award recipient, Margaret Mercer. Next, she had to secure the evidence. Keeping everything only on that old phone was too dangerous. She found a nearby print shop that did document printing. Using some of Helen's money, she printed every single page of the gray ledger photos on glossy paper, big, clear, sharp, so that every name, every number, every signature could be seen easily. She made 5 complete sets. Then she made the most important phone call. In Helen's notebook, which Helen had left on the kitchen table, Emma found a number labeled nephew. She dialed it. Hello? You don't know me, she began quickly as soon as she heard a man's voice. My name is Emma. I'm a friend of Helen Porter. She heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Emma didn't give him a chance to interrupt. I don't have time to explain everything, but I know what happened to Vera. I have proof. Today at 12 p.m. At the Civic Center Auditorium, there's an event. I'll be there. Please come, and bring the biggest portrait of Vera you have. And, do you remember if Helen ever told you about other families? People who also lost loved ones after they got involved with Daniel Mercer? If you know anyone, call them. Tell them to come too. She hung up before he could answer. She had done everything she could from her side. Now all that was left was to follow through. Just before noon, Emma walked up to the Civic Center auditorium. Expensive cars were lined up outside. Journalists stood everywhere with cameras and notepads. Inside, the large hall with red velvet seats was almost completely full. An orchestra was playing soft music. On the stage, the mayor and other important officials sat in a row. Among them, in a bright, elegant suit, sat Margaret Mercer. She smiled graciously and nodded to people she recognized in the audience. The very picture of a respectable leader. Emma tucked the folders with the printed pages into her bag. She knew she looked terrible. Her hair messy, clothes wrinkled from yesterday, a bruise darkening on her cheek where Daniel had grabbed her. She was the perfect image of a woman who had been through hell. And was still standing. She stepped into the hall. The usher tried to stop her. "Excuse me, you can't go there." But Emma just walked past him, eyes fixed on the stage. She started walking down the center aisle directly toward the front. The music stopped. Heads turned one by one. People stared at this strange, ragged woman disturbing the serious, official ceremony. Margaret Mercer saw her too. The smile on Margaret's face froze for a moment, then turned into a cold, hard expression. She leaned toward a security guard at the front of the stage and whispered something. Two big men in suits stepped into the aisle and blocked Emma's path. "Ma'am, you can't go any further," one of them said roughly. Emma stopped. She was about 30 feet from the stage. The entire hall was watching her. She opened her mouth to shout. She just needed 1 second, 1 sentence. But someone else spoke first. A man in the first row suddenly stood up. He was wearing a simple work jacket. At first, Emma didn't recognize him. "Let her through," he said loudly to the guards. "Let her speak." He pointed to the stage, not at Emma. "That's my father," he added, voice shaking with anger. "My father's apartment is also in that gray ledger." His words echoed through the silent hall like a gunshot. He wasn't yelling. He spoke firmly, calmly, with the kind of heaviness that comes from pain and time. That made it even more powerful. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. The orchestra members froze, bows in midair. Journalists quickly turned their cameras from the stage to the man in the worker's jacket. The security guards hesitated. A moment ago, they'd been told to remove a crazy woman. Now this crazy woman suddenly had a witness. The mayor turned to look at Margaret, clearly confused and waiting for her reaction. But Margaret's face had gone stiff. The calm mask of dignity cracked, and underneath, you could almost see something wild and furious. She understood the situation was slipping away. Emma needed exactly that tiny pause. She took a step around the guards, then another. She didn't run. She walked. Each step down the aisle echoed in the silent hall. Hundreds of eyes watched her. This tired, bruised woman walking toward one of the most powerful people in the city. "Grab her!" Margaret finally shouted. Her voice, usually smooth and controlled, now sounded sharp and screechy. "Get her out of here immediately!" The guards moved, ready to obey, but they were too late. Emma had already climbed the 3 steps onto the stage. The master of ceremonies, a nervous young man, backed away from the podium. Emma walked up, took the heavy microphone in her hand, and turned to face the audience. In the first row, she saw Daniel jump to his feet. Under his hair, she could see a strip of white bandage where Helen had hit him with the glass carafe. His face was twisted with hatred. "She's insane," he shouted, trying to drown out the noise of the crowd. "She needs medical help. She stole money from us and now she's making up stories. Call the police." The police. That was exactly what Emma wanted. She lifted the microphone and took a deep breath. "My name is Emma Hayes," she said. She paused for a moment, so everyone could hear her name clearly. 2 weeks ago, I married this man." She nodded toward Daniel. "And yesterday, he and his mother, the very respected Margaret Mercer, threw me out of my own apartment. The apartment that, on paper, I supposedly sold to her myself." An outraged murmur rolled through the hall. Margaret jumped up from her chair on stage. "This is slander. Lies," she screamed. "I'll sue you." "You definitely will," Emma said calmly. She lifted one of the folders she was carrying. They called me a thief. They said I was crazy. But this, she raised one of the printed pages high so people could see the columns and lines. This is your real record of service to the city, Mrs. Mercer. Your real list of properties. She didn't wait for anyone to react. She started reading. Slowly, clearly, so that every person in the hall could hear and understand each word. Number 1. James Harrison, born 1948. Disappeared in 2019, never found. His 2-bedroom condo on Gerda Street was inherited by a distant relative, then sold. Perpetrator of the transaction, Mercer Daniel. The man in the worker's jacket clenched his fists. That's my father, he said in a low voice. People near him stepped back, staring at him. Emma turned the page. Number 2. Samantha Green, born 1977. Died in a car accident in 2020. Her studio apartment on Peace Avenue went by will to her partner, Mercer Daniel. She looked up. The hall was completely silent. Everyone was listening. Journalists pushed one another, rushing closer to the stage, cameras flashing nonstop. Number 3. Vera Porter, born 1988. Emma's voice shook. Drowned. Accident. 1 month after her wedding. She couldn't finish the sentence. The back doors of the hall suddenly burst open. A group of people came in, led by a young man Emma recognized as Helen's nephew. They were carrying a large, black-framed portrait of a young woman with bright, kind eyes. Vera Porter. Her smiling face looked down over the whole hall. A cry of horror and sympathy swept through the audience. Now it wasn't just names on a page. It was a real person. A real life. That's my sister. Helen's nephew shouted, his voice breaking. And our aunt, her mother, was arrested yesterday for trying to save this woman. He pointed at Emma. And then the hall exploded. People stood up all over the place. Jonathan Baker, that's my brother. A woman shouted from the back. The Wilsons. They were our neighbors. They left so suddenly, someone whispered. Chaos broke out. People yelled, pointed at the stage, at Margaret, at Daniel. In a few minutes, the reputation Margaret had carefully built over decades collapsed. The name that once sounded like honor and respect was now being spat out in anger and disgust. The mayor, very pale, realized he was now publicly sitting next to a monster. This scandal could destroy his own career as well. He turned sharply to the chief of police, who was sitting on stage in full uniform, and said something, gesturing toward the Mercers. Emma watched everything as if through a fog. She had done what she needed to do. She had stood up not only for herself and Helen, but for Vera, for James, Samantha, Jonathan, and all the others whose names were written in that gray book. She lowered the microphone. Police officers were already pushing their way toward the stage. They moved the journalists aside and formed a path. Emma walked down from the stage and met the officer leading the group. Without a word, she handed him one of the folders. Every page of the gray ledger printed inside. Everything is here, she said quietly. Names, addresses, dates. And I have photos of the original ledger on my phone. The officer opened the folder and flipped through the pages quickly. His face grew darker with each sheet he read. He looked up at Emma, then at the stage and gave an order to his team. Emma stepped aside and leaned against the wall, watching the end of the nightmare unfold. 2 officers walked up to Margaret. Margaret shouted at them, waving some kind of ID, talking about her connections, trying to intimidate them, but it didn't work anymore. One officer calmly took her arm and put handcuffs on her. The other did the same on her other wrist. The pillar of the community was now just another arrested suspect. Daniel tried to escape down the aisle, pushing people aside, cursing loudly. But he was caught, held down and handcuffed as well. As they dragged him past, Margaret looked at Emma one last time. There was no power left in her eyes, no confidence, only empty, burning hatred. Then the doors closed behind them. It was over. Helen's nephew walked up to Emma. "Thank you," he said simply, "for what you did for her. For all of us." Emma just nodded. She had no words left. The next day, Helen was released. All charges against her were dropped. A week later, After the district attorney's office stepped in, all of the Mercers' property deals were officially declared invalid. Emma got her apartment back. She walked into it alone. It still smelled wrong, like fried potatoes and cheap air freshener from the previous tenant. She threw open all the windows and let in as much fresh air as she could. Then she did the one thing she knew how to do best. She went to her flower shop. The owner himself had called her, apologizing over and over, begging her to return. She came back carrying armfuls of white lilies, eucalyptus, and baby's breath. At home, she turned on some music and got to work. She sorted the flowers, trimmed the stems, and arranged big, bright, cleansing bouquets. With every flower she placed in a vase, it felt like the dirt, fear, and pain were leaving her home and her life, slowly being replaced by light, peace, and hope. She had taken back her home. She had taken back her life. That was an incredibly intense story, dear listeners. A story that still leaves your heart feeling a little uneasy. It shows how fragile our happiness can be, and how important it is not to give up when everything collapses, but to stand up for yourself, even when you're shaking inside. You can't help but ask yourself, did Emma do the right thing? Was it really right for her to stand alone against a whole system like that? To risk the only thing she had left? Her freedom and maybe even her life? Could there have been another, safer way? But what kind of safe way is there when the people who are supposed to protect the law are the ones breaking it? What would you have done in her place? Would you have had the courage to do what she did? And what do you think about Helen's choice? She knowingly walked into the hands of those criminals and sacrificed herself to buy Emma a little time and a chance to fight back. Was her sacrifice justified? Was it too much? Or was it the only way? I would really love to read your thoughts about this. Maybe you noticed something important in the story, some detail that touched you, or something you completely disagree with. Maybe you have your own experience with betrayal, injustice, or standing up to people in power. Please share everything you're thinking in the comments under this video. Let's talk about it together. And of course, if this story kept you glued until the end. If you were rooting for the heroines all the way through, it would mean a lot if you leave a like, subscribe to Clara's Stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support is what keeps this channel alive. I honestly wish that you only meet honest, kind people in your life, and that you never have to face this kind of evil or deceit. All the best to you. At the end of this video, you'll see a small window appear in the center of your screen. Please click on it. That's where you'll find more of our most exciting stories. Also, please remember that creating stories like this takes a lot of time, work, and care so that you always get emotional, high-quality content. If you like what I do and you want Clara's Stories to keep posting powerful, moving stories like this, even a small donation helps more than you can imagine. Every contribution helps keep these stories going. Thank you so much for your kindness and support. I walked out of that auditorium with my hands still shaking. But for the first time in days, I could finally breathe. Everything I had gone through, the fear, the shame, the moments I was sure my life was over, brought me to one simple truth. Sometimes, the people who smile the biggest smiles are hiding the darkest secrets. And sometimes, even the smallest act of courage, done when you feel completely broken, is enough to change everything. If you're listening to me right now, and you're going through something that feels impossible, I want you to remember this. You are stronger than the trap you're in. And there is always a way out. Always. Hope has a way of finding people who refuse to give up. If you agree with me, and if you enjoyed my story, show it with a like. Let's see how many of us are out there. And tell me in the comments, what city are you listening from, and what time is it right now where you are? For more life stories like this one, feel free to check out my other videos and hit subscribe. On your screen, you'll see 2 new stories I'm sure you'll enjoy. Just tap one, and dive right in. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in my next story. Love to you all.